Hey everybody, welcome back to Fight Talk. This weekend we have an absolute banger of a main event between Ilia Topuria and Max Holloway. Highly anticipated and might be, hopefully, highly competitive. I've read the room, I've taken the temperature, most people are choosing Holloway to win. Fighters are picking Holloway, comments are saying Holloway, my polls are Holloway, but as it stands right now, Holloway is not favored to win in the betting odds. Those that are picking Topuria are of the mind that Holloway is at a turning point in his career and believe in Topuria's chances to knock him out, and that's a fair argument. So let's talk about it. Max Holloway has had up to this point an incredible chin, excellent cardio, great lateral movement, and heavy striking volume. I very much enjoyed his skill progression and career development since he debuted in 2012. We got to see him grow up in the UFC. With Ilia, we have seen rapid growth and adaptability in a relatively short amount of time. From being primarily a grappler to a competent striker, he would stand up in his earlier fights for sure, but a lot of the times he would just take it to the ground eventually, and he's taken bits and pieces of boxing and incorporated it into his game effectively. Fight over fight, we've seen growth and development and great strategy. We still have a lot to learn about Ilia because we know he hasn't shown much of his wrestling and grappling in the UFC. So Max Holloway is an orthodox fighter who's very comfortable at southpaw, and I think that will matter in this fight because it allows for more opportunities for Holloway's shot selection and angles. Shifting into certain attacks may be really helpful here. Obviously, Max's chin and cardio are legendary, so that combined with his high volume output is going to be key. We've seen Ilia slow down in fights that are higher paced and more grueling, and Max has 5 rounds to work. Ilia's fight with Emmett was a slower tempo that he controlled compared to his other fights, so I'm not really sure how his conditioning will fare in a fight with Holloway if it does go the distance. Who is setting the tempo and pace of this fight is one of the observations I'm looking forward to. Max, technically speaking, still gets better fight after fight and adjusts strategies mid-fight based on his opponent's tactics. That doesn't mean he is always going to win. We're talking about the elite of the division and a game of inches, and because of his competency in both stances, his footwork, his game planning and adaptability, his endurance and his time in the game, he's developed a versatile striking arsenal at this elite level. And if you rewatch his fight with Cub Swanson, it's like he was mashing all the buttons and there's so much variety that he has, but there is a method to the madness that he has refined into what we see today. But with all this time spent at the elite level, the fight game begins to creep up from behind. Fans of Holloway, which should be everyone, do dread the idea of Holloway getting put to sleep. It's just whether he defies the odds or not on Saturday. I mean, that's why we're watching. Can he overcome the challenge of Topuria and, win or lose, make it to the decision if he doesn't get the knockout or submission? With such high volume comes more opportunities for the opponent to land their shots. It's the compromise Max has made, and so far, his chin is held up, taking jabs and leg kicks and left hooks and right hands. How about the weight cuts and transitioning from featherweight to lightweight and back down? There's a lot of mileage on Max, and he's only 32. And here's a fight against a younger, very dangerous striker with a ground game just waiting to be used in Ilia. And although Max has won by knockout or TKO as many times as he's gone to decision, the knockout threat seems to weigh much heavier on Ilia's side. Now for Ilia, and what I've enjoyed about him is the rise in progression from fight to fight, from being a serious grappler to showing very good boxing techniques that have grown over time with his shoulder rolls, his pivots, body jabs, and all that can be set up or countered from there. And like Holloway or other elite fighters, it does show his adaptability during fights. He is very good at pressuring his opponents, getting them to the cage, cutting off movement and doing damage. The way he uses his jab to the body and head, stepping off and countering with precision and speed is scary. Ilia is very fast, very precise. And as I mentioned earlier, I do wonder about his endurance. I can only note that in some of his earlier fights, he has slowed down when it's a bit faster paced. But keep in mind that we haven't seen him in a lot of fights that go the distance. The Emmett fight wasn't super fast paced, but he did look good. He looked measured and composed with notable improvements defensively, so I can only assume it will look even better than that. But as Jai Herbert, Emmett, Volkanovski showed, and a lot of other fighters, at times Ilia does have a vulnerability on his right side, so depending on how Max does at timing his offense or counters, and from which angles and stance, we will likely see it targeted again. And with every round that goes by, and every misstep that Max tries to make Ilia make, we have seen Topuria at times overcommit to his strikes and get out of position. I think Emmett found great opportunity in kicking the lead leg, and circling to the right, trying to find the counter over Ilia's jab and shifting his stance while throwing to land his left hook. Max has shown he can shift, he can thread, he can land his own counters, but ultimately, he is a volume striker and he pays for it in damage over the course of a fight. And that's a scary proposition against someone like Ilia, whose every feint and every tactic to pressure comes with great consequence. So I am picking Ilia to win this fight. I do have a lot of optimism that Max will be able to outwork and find the opportunities others have had against Ilia. The difference is that Ilia can play the game. If Ilia can find the success of feinting and faking, using his calf kicks, jabs, pivots, and counters effectively as he's done in the past, then that means he can add in an element of wrestling and grappling. And with respect to Max, who has excellent takedown defense and decent grappling himself, he rarely is the one to mix it in enough to make it a credible threat. We can point to fights where he's used it, like against Yair Rodriguez, but he doesn't mix it in or initiate it very often. Regardless, Ilia will be more likely the one to implement it before Max does, and assuming all the previous tactics work out for Ilia, and given the state of judging this year, some judges weigh that effort more. Or maybe the judging is completely fair, and the fight is so close, but the difference maker is that Ilia found an opportunity to dictate where the fight takes place. Even if Max defends every takedown, that means likely that Ilia is the one pressing the action. These things, as trivial as it may seem, actually matter. With that being said, the major advantage for Max is he's a much more capable kicker than Ilia is, and don't get me wrong, a kick to the calf is going to work in both fighters' favor to open up the game, but given Ilia's stance versus Max's, it's more open to Max. But circling to the right or finding the right exit is going to be important. Can Max lead Ilia into his kicks or make Ilia react to something low and go high? Can he recreate what Jai Herbert and other fighters attempted? Ilia showed he can recover very quickly, but he still has been dropped from his right side. He's been cut on his right side. Can Max keep finding and creating that opening round after round without getting countered or without getting cornered? Because of this, it's so important that Max finds a way to command the octagon and operate at open space and pressure Ilia when he can. And although Ilia's speed is incredible in its own right, Max has shown much more mobility with his legs in my opinion. The dynamic of the ring generalship is going to be very, very interesting because I think both have very similar opportunities against each other, and that is why the threat of wrestling against the cage, takedown threats and attempts, and trying to get some control time, I think, weighs in Ilia's favor. And I may have gotten into the weeds over the past few weeks looking over everything between both fighters. My initial lean was Max Holloway finding a pattern and exploiting Ilia's stand-up, potentially getting a knockout or TKO down the stretch. I was ready to say Max in the 4th round. I also dabbled with the idea of Ilia having no respect for anything Max throws and either comes on strong and gets the knockout or submission. But I found a happy place in my mind that, out of many possibilities, I think the fight goes to decision and Ilia walks away with the victory. If Ilia does just enough to secure 3 rounds, he wins the fight. Then that leads to the inevitable question of who scores what for each round. I'm of the mind that we may end up in an argument of the lesser volume but more powerful shots of Ilia will be in contention with the higher volume and strikes landed of Max Holloway. So it's a perfect recipe for the expert bettors to throw their hands up in the air and call robbery, which seems to be the trend this year. And as cliche as it is to say that I won't be surprised by either guy winning, I won't be surprised by either guy winning. But the question to be answered is not who wins, but how the fighter won. On paper, this is a fascinating and intriguing fight. Nonetheless, I give Topuria the edge because he has the advantage of youth, a ton of blueprints of Max Holloway, an unpredictability and serious threat of wrestling and grappling that can change every single dynamic of what plays out on the feet. And given the betting odds, I'm certainly looking at a few plays that involve Max Holloway. Anyways, I'm so excited. Please leave your opinions down below, and if you don't mind, I'd appreciate your support. Stay safe and enjoy the fights.